Climbing shoes play an integral part in your climbing. Whether you're at the gym, at the crag, you've blown through a pair of shoes, it's time to upgrade for a new one, or you need a new pair in a different style to what you currently have, it may be time to consider another pair of climbing shoes. Or if, like me, you just generally have a problem and have too many pairs. We're going to go through our range of climbing shoes today, and whilst our range isn't extensive, we should have you covered whether you are a beginner just starting out looking for your first pair as an upgrade from rental shoes, right the way through to flashing those hard problems at your next boulder comp. Being a bit of a trad daddy, anything like that, we should have you covered with our current range. One side note to mention is that climbing shoes are very personal in their fit, so any illusions I make to fit are what fit my feet. They may not fit for you because climbing shoes are very personal, so we always recommend going to an outdoor retailer, trying shoes on, making sure they fit for you because your fit might be different to my fit. Our climbing shoe range is split across two brands, La Sportiva and Scarpa. Both Italian brands that have been making climbing specific footwear for a very long time. Scarpa made their first climbing specific product in the 70s. Sportiva were a little bit later to the game in the 80s, but it's fair to say they've both been making climbing specific shoes for a very long time. So they seem to know what they're talking about when it comes to making climbing products. We'll start a little range review with Scarpa because our selection from Scarpa is a little bit smaller than La Sportiva, so Sportiva will take a little bit longer to go through. And it seems logical to start with the Arpia. Now we do the Arpia in both a men's fit and a ladies' low volume fit. They both share exactly the same feature set, so anything I say about them will refer to both of them. The only main difference is the LV is lower in volume for smaller, lower volume feet. The Arpia is a bit of an all-rounder. It's got a full-length sole on it, so a little bit more supportive than some of the others that will have split soles, so it's a little bit stiffer. And it's got a moderate downturn, so it's going to be a little bit more comfortable. That's paired with Vibram XS Grip 2 rubber, so really nice sticky rubber grip, clues in the name there, and you get a nice little toe patch on the top there. So a really good all-rounder, both indoors and out, could be your first sort of slightly more performance-oriented shoe. Moving on, we then have the Scarpa Force. This guy's a little bit different than the Arpias that we've just looked at, in the sense that it has a completely flat sole to it. It also moves over from XS Grip 2 to XS Edge, so a slightly stiffer compound that's better for standing on those smaller edges, but in combination with that flat sole, they're a little bit more comfortable. The sort of shoe that you might wear if you were doing some multi-pitch trad climbing or your all-day training shoe where comfort is a little bit more of a priority. You get things like a nicely padded tongue and a little bit around the top cuff there. But generally speaking, it's flatter, so your feet are going to be in a flatter position rather than with that downturn, so you're going to be able to stand in them for longer periods of time. Quite a good little trad shoe, this. We'll now move on to the Scarpa Vapor S. Now I will say first and foremost, your shoes will look a little bit different to this when they come out of the box because I've been using these for a good few weeks now, so they're nicely broken in. There's a little bit less rubber on them than potentially yours will show up with, they're a bit chalky, but I have been using them and really enjoy them. Now these are a moderately downturned shoe again, but a little bit more performance oriented than the likes of the Arpia. They still use Vibram XS Grip 2 rubber and they've still got a full length sole, but they are a little bit softer than the Arpias, so they offer a little bit less support and they will force your feet into a slightly more aggressive position depending on your sizing. But these as a really good all-rounder for indoor and outdoor bouldering, which you might see me doing a little bit of with some B-roll, and sort of indoor sport routes. But all round, these Vapors are a really impressive little shoe that I think will suit a lot of people if they're after slightly more performance-oriented fit. Now these being the Vapor S, they are a slipper, technically. They do have this little nano strap on them, which you can use when you need to crank in a little bit. You can also completely remove this because this is just looped on the side here. You can take it off and use them as a slipper. So they're really comfortable to slip on and off, and slipper. Really nice little all-round performance shoe. Switching allegiances to La Sportiva now, we'll start with the Tarantula family. We've got 4 models from them, so we've got 2 men's and 2 women's. We have both the regular Tarantula, this is the women's one here, the men's one is exactly the same, just in a men's fit and men's sizing. And we then have the Tarantula Boulder. Now, both of these use La Sportiva's friction rubber, which is their own rubber compound. Slightly more durable compound, so it's not quite as sticky, but should last you a little bit longer, which makes it a little bit more suitable for those all-day training sessions. Potentially, if you're a beginner where your footwork isn't quite going to be up to scratch, you'll have a shoe that will stand up better to that abuse a little bit more until you get better on your footwork. but equally these are just a comfort-oriented shoe that can be used for long days tradding, all-day training, or if you are that little bit more beginner. But the main difference between the regular Tarantula and the Boulder, on top you get on the Boulder that toe patch for a little bit of toe hooking. Essentially the Boulder is just a little bit more of a bouldering oriented shoe, hence the name. And on the bottom you have a split sole, so it's slightly better at smearing and moving around for footwork when you're standing on volumes, you're doing things inside or moving around on a boulder where you tend to move your feet a little bit more than if you're doing a little bit more trad. Essentially the fit is very similar between them, you just have a more bouldering oriented option. Next up we have the Kubo, which is another split-soled shoe that's potentially designed with indoor climbing, indoor sport climbing and bouldering in mind a little bit more. You can still use this outdoors, but the Kubo is primarily focused as a little bit more of an indoor beast. The Kubo would be a viable upgrade from something like the Tarantula Boulder if you're looking for something a little bit more performance oriented. You swap over to Vibram Excess Edge rubber, so it's a little bit stickier, a little bit stiffer around the toes, so you do still have the edge in performance. But because you've got that split sole, you can still smear as well as edge, so it's quite a good all-rounder. More heel tension thanks to the P3 system that you get from La Sportiva in most of their higher range models. With the Kubo you have a shoe that, if sized right, can still be worn all day for all day comfort but with more performance. Next up is the Squama. So the Squama is a little bit of a performance beast designed around overhangs and technical boulders. You get a moderate downturn again in the toe and a split sole, and then you get Vibram Excess Grip 2 rubber on the bottom. We also get this little cutout here that helps your forefoot to form and move around on smaller footholds, so you can get really precise footwork with the Squama. You also get a massive rubber toe patch on top for toe hooking and that P3 tension system in the heel. So sized correctly, this can be a really performance oriented shoe. It's also a little bit wider than some of the other models in La Sportiva's range, so it's something worth considering if you have slightly wider feet. Next up from La Sportiva is the Miura, and there are slight differences between the men's and the women's model. So in terms of the shape, everything like that very similar. Obviously the women's is going to size a little bit smaller. It's a full length soled shoe. The men's uses Vibram Excess Edge, so slightly stiffer rubber that comes in line because they're expecting men to potentially have slightly longer feet which will have a little bit more flex built into them, or to be a little bit heavier. So use Excess Edge on them to be a little bit stiffer for when you're on those smaller footholds. You're going to be using these on hard sport routes, overhanging and hard bouldering, so you get quite an aggressive downturn. You're expected to have your toes crimped up at the end a little bit. For the ladies model, they move over to slightly softer excess grip rubber because the shoes are generally a little bit smaller. So that difference is very minimal, but you do effectively get slightly stickier rubber on the ladies version of the Miura. You get that P3 system on both, so you've got really good heel tension, so it locks in and forces your toe towards the front. So again, very precise with the Miura, and 3 Velcro straps so you can really crank in the fit. For any of you competition climbers, we have both a men's and women's fit on the Solution Comp, based on the standard solution from La Sportiva. The Comp has a few differences that make it a little bit more competition oriented. So you get a much bigger rubber toe patch for all that toe hooking. It's very soft and compliant, so it's really good for smearing on those volumes in modern competition bouldering and sport style climbs. You get that P3 system in the heel, so loads of heel tension. It's a very soft, flexible shoe that's designed to keep you on the wall, along with Vibram Excess Grip 2 on both models. Really sticky rubber that keeps you on those holds, at least until you dyno off them. And finally in the range from La Sportiva we have something a little different, the TC Pro. Now this is a bit of a different beast to everything else that we looked at so far. First and foremost, it's got laces. So the lace spin, this allows you to be a little bit more precise in its fit, but you also get a mid-cut for a little bit more protection around the ankle because this beast is really designed around big days out tradding, crack climbing, things like that, when you're going to potentially be throwing in a few foot jams. So having that extra protection up over the ankle is a welcome addition, so you're less likely to scuff up your ankles. Other reason why you've got laces as well is laces tend to be a little bit better if you're placing those foot jams. Got little bits of protection around the bottom of the laces there as well for abrasion resistance. You get a full length Vibram Excess Edge sole on it, and this is really quite stiff compared to some of the others, so it's going to support your foot a lot more when you're wearing them for longer periods. You can stand on some of those smaller footholds, and if you do need to throw a foot jam in, it's going to crank in nicely, so you're going to feel really nice and secure. These are the ones for your big wall climbers, your trad daddies. Everyone's into a little bit of crack climbing, because who doesn't enjoy a little bit of crack? So there we have it, a little rundown of our admittedly quite small climbing shoe range. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea about the different models, where you might use them. That's obviously not an absolute, they are all ultimately climbing shoes, so different climbing shoe models you can use for slightly different disciplines. It's just some of the specific models are a little bit more focused in on a certain style of climbing. Speaking of climbing, now seems like a perfect time to use these Vapors and do a little bit of climbing myself. So I'm going to pretend that this is B-roll and do a little bit of climbing while I can. We'll see you in the next one.